Welcome to How They Do That. I'm your host, Scott Waldron, and here is a little preview of what you're going to hear today.
People hate losing, hate being hurt way more than they value the upside. If you're basically giving your work away, then you're not free when something better comes along. Basically, if you lose $10, that hurts much more than if you found, I had $10 in my pocket and it dropped out on the sidewalk. The felt pain of that is so much worse than if you, pull out an old sport coat and find $10 in the pocket.
We're all negotiating all the time. And today I am going to have someone on to help us understand negotiation just a little bit more. Now, we don't go super deep into it, but there are a few surface level questions that I ask just to understand a little bit more about pricing and where do we go with that thought and that thought. And he talks a little bit about his history with Chris Voss, who is, the Never Split the Difference guy. If you've heard of Chris, you've heard of Never Split the Difference, and it blew up kind of this whole negotiation idea, popularized it, was on all kinds of shows and in the media and all kinds of things. I've had somebody from his organization, the Black Swan Group, on my show Unlocked, so you can check that out. But John Richardson is a former associate at the Harvard Negotiation Project. He's a lecturer on negotiation and organizational behavior at MIT's Sloan School of Management, lecturer on law at Harvard. He's also a firefighter and an EMT with Carlisle Fire Department. So you're going to get a little bit, he's got a fun energy to him. I would love to sit in on one of his classes, that's for sure. But he adds some interesting insights into the world of negotiation. And if you wait till the end, I kind of jumped in with a last minute question about, hey, anchor pricing, should we go first or should we not? Okay, and he answers that question. So let's see what John has to say. Hello, John. Welcome to the show. So I want to go ahead and start out with this really quick. I want to ask about your history with Chris Voss. Maybe some of my listeners have heard of Chris, Never Split the Difference, that whole thing. And you actually have a personal relationship with Chris, if we want to call it that. But it was interesting how y'all met and you've actually worked together on some various things. Can you give me a little bit of background on Chris's, his history, his ideas and your ideas and how they came together?
It's interesting. I would say that there are two big communities of people who study negotiation. One of them is law enforcement, and one of them is, business schools and law schools, those people are well interconnected. Chris is the guy who really connected both those groups. He came one time, he had a knee operation, and he came over to Harvard, because he was off duty in the FBI. And he had just had a really frustrating case, and he, where the people they were trying to rescue didn't make it out. And so he's like, I got to get better. I got to see who else has stuff that we can borrow and use. And boy, I think and so he came up to Harvard and actually was in my wife's class at Harvard Law School. And I met him that way at a party, a class party afterwards. And I mean, right away, I was blown away by the guy because I got home and, found this party is kind of winding down. And there was one beer left. So I went and grabbed it. And he had the same idea. And so he's just looking at the empty bowl and he just had this solo cup and he just kind of held it and made a sad face. And I just I didn't even think of it. I just poured him half the beer. And then I was like, wait, how did he do that? It was like seeing somebody do a magic trick. And so then I was like, who are you? And where did you come from? What are you? And I ended up talking to him all night. And then I wanted to go to the course they taught at Quantico. He was the head instructor of the FBI's hostage negotiation course. And he said, we got so many foreign dignitaries from other law enforcement who want to come. I really can't get you in. Sorry. But then Harvard Extension, the night school, called me up and they're like, we need to have a negotiation class. Can you help us out? And it's at night. I want to be home with my kids. But then I thought, this is my chance. I'll do it with Chris. And then, that'll be good for him if he ever wants to go teach somewhere else, because no place ever wants to be the first place that you teach. But if you can say, yeah, actually, I taught a course at Harvard, that helps. And that way I'd get to see what he did teaching. And I had the best time. And then he invited me to come when he retired and started Black Swan. One of their first gigs was teaching the military and intelligence services of the UAE hostage negotiation. And he invited me to come along on that, and everybody else is a super experienced hostage negotiator. And, then they would say to me, hey, here's what we think works. Does the research back that up? And I'd be like, yes, it does. And he'd be like, okay, great. That's fine. Thanks. And, but it was like drinking out of a fire hose. I learned so much from them working on that. And their stuff was so good.
Wow. That's really cool. That's really fun. So you kind of helped each other out, just kind of pushed each other a little bit. That's really great. I love to see that collaboration.
Is reciprocity, right? One of the things they do is, like let's say you're robbing a bank, right? This is what they called an unplanned barricade. Like you didn't want to be a hostage taker, but the cops surround the bank while you're in there, and so now you point your gun at a teller, and you're not, this wasn't part of your plan. And what they do is, it used to be in the old days, they'd say, okay, you got 10 minutes, then we're coming in, and then it was 50-50. Is the guy going to surrender, or bullets are going to fly. Now they throw you in a phone in a suitcase and they just talk to you. And they say, hey, man, like, why did you have to do this? Like, are there people depending on you? And they're super sympathetic and super nice. And they'll listen to you all day long. And then, because you're not planning this, at some point you get hungry and thirsty, or you need a smoke. And you say, hey, give me a sandwich. And they say, oh, okay, what kind you want? We'll get anything you want. And, they won't give you guns or drugs or something, but a sandwich or your favorite drink, they'll give you that. And then once you're biting into it, they go, hey, do you think you could let one of the hostages go? And they do, because you did them a favor, even something as inconsequential as a sandwich. There was another guy at NYPD hostage negotiation, Dominic Messino. He's passed now, sadly, but he used to start every lecture. He would say, what is the value of a human life? And people would say, oh, it's infinite. Like, you can't price it. He'd be like, 3 cigarettes usually does it.
That's it. So just, if you're a hostage negotiator, or if you're going in to sell something, just make sure you have enough cigarettes in your pocket to
have something to give them. Now you want to be careful. A sandwich is the perfect metaphor, because if you give them a sandwich and you don't get anything, okay, so what? It's a little bit different from saying, oh, okay, I'll speak at your conference for free, and I hope that'll lead to future business. That's giving away a house, not a sandwich. And if, you don't get anything, then it's like, well, what was I doing? But little things that you can give them, and especially if you can figure out what they care about, so it's like a special little treat for them.
Okay, so let's take all that, John, and let's fly into, so say I am a coach or a speaker or something like that, and I am on the phone. Now, okay, John, I'm going to interrupt myself for a second, because I've had this happen recently. I am a coach. I also do a lot of public speaking. And a big thing is, if I can speak to, and a lot of event planners will say this when they don't have enough budget. Hey, we've got your target audience. It's a chance for you to get in front of all of our people. It's a really good opportunity. And, if you come in, we'll pay your admission into the conference. So you get free admission into the conference. But you're going to cover all your travel, hotel and plane. Okay. And travel. But you know what? And you get a free audience. Okay. For your thing. Oftentimes it's okay, cool. I'm getting in front of my target market. And if it's an association, I've got, 30 to 50 different companies in the room that I can quote unquote pitch to, or, prove my credibility and competency there. What can I do to kind of sweeten the deal? If I am in a situation like that, what do I do? I mean, where do you think about that, first of all? Are you cool with that? Or what do you do?
Well, Scott, you're not paying me for this. So obviously I'm vulnerable to that.
Hey, John, you can get in front of a lot of different people if you're on my show. you know? So there
Well,
you
I
go.
mean, I think this goes back to what we were talking about before. I mean, I'm doing this from my dining room, and it's an hour or something. So, that's a sandwich. Sure. Happy to give it away. If, you know, I'm going to fly to California for it, well, that's a different thing. So part of it is evaluating what's the cost to you, and is it a cost that you're happy to, shrug off? If you go fishing and a fish takes the worm and you don't catch him, like, okay, fine, like that's all part of it. You had a nice day on the lake anyway. A couple things strike me about that. One is I want to know, okay, but are you paying anybody else? Or are you just trying to get me to do this for free? What are you paying other speakers at this thing? I want to be treated at least as well as them.
Okay, so we should ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. You would, anytime you're buying or selling something, and in this case, you're selling your services, you want to get a fair market price for it. If it's a used car, you get Kelly's Blue Book. But you could either provide that benchmark. You say, well, here's what I got from a similar conference. Or you can ask them, like, well, is that the most you're paying anybody? And people could lie to you about that, but I think mostly they don't. And if they're paying somebody else, then they start to squirm a little bit uncomfortably. And especially in my case, because my thing is negotiation, I'd say, well, do you want to learn negotiation from somebody who can't do it on their own behalf or from somebody who can? And, that usually helps out. Another thing I would do is to, and sometimes you say, look, no, I'm not willing to do it for free. Here's what my fee is. And one thing that helps there is you say, I charge everybody the same. So I treat everybody equally. And if I gave you this discount that you're asking for, I'd have to give it to everybody. And so it's more, you're costing me a lot more than you realize if I agreed to this. And that persuades some people, and again, there's a lot of different things you could try, and some work on some people, some work on other people. I try to have 4 or 5 different things that I try. The last one is usually, hey, you know what? I have a colleague who's younger and just starting out and would love this kind of opportunity. And, although they don't have the reputation, they do a really good job. I think you'll be really happy with them. And that's a pretty good signal. You don't have to stamp your foot and say, this is my offer, take it or leave it. But if you start saying, hey, what about this other person? Then they realize that that's not working on you. And if your answer to what they're currently proposing is no, that's a really good way to make them understand that that's for real and not just a bargaining position.
Okay. Let me go into another one. Let's go in the coaching space. So I'm put a proposal together for a coaching engagement with a new client. And they come back to me and they'll say things like, oh yeah, this is more than what we were planning on. Right. So we have this many people, but this is more than what we were expecting. We had this other person that came in, at about 20% less than your fee, and so we're just that's kind of where we're at, Scott.
I mean, when they have a standard that they bring in, and it's a good standard, it's an actual market standard. Then I usually take that into account. I might not say yes to it, but I'll always say, you know what, that's a really good point. You're making sense here. We bought our house from this developer. Well, not the house I'm in now, but the first house that my wife and I bought. It was a condo in Cambridge. And a developer had, bought it and fixed it up and flipped it. And we were looking, and it was bad luck for him because the house had come under agreement twice and then they couldn't get financing. But that made it look to the market like a lemon, if you walk away from the agreement, there must be something really wrong with the place. So there was a really attractive price. But we were looking to push it even lower. And so, we did our comparable research and we found there was a single family home about 3 blocks away that had sold for less per square foot. So we said, oh, what about this? A single family that's worth more than a condo. Like, we should get that same price per square foot. And the guy says, okay, I know the house you're talking about. That backs up to the Kentucky Fried Chicken on Mass Avenue. And the fan from the kitchen blows towards the house. There's a layer of grease about 1/2 inch thick on the wall that faces the KFC. And there's typically like drunken fights in the parking lot at about 1 a.m. every Friday and Saturday. If you buy this place and offer to trade with them, they'll take it. And so, we had to say, all right, you know what? You win. You're right. That is what it's worth. We don't have that much money, but okay. But if you don't acknowledge when they have a good point about what the market standards are, about what's fair and right, I think that really puts you at a disadvantage. It pisses them off to no real purpose. So I might not end up taking the deal, but I'll always say, you know what, like, you're right, that is fair. But another thing you can do if you're still not happy to agree to that price is I try never to make an offer. I try to always make two offers. I'd say, well, I can come and do the thing that you're asking for, and this would be my price, or I could do it remotely for this price, or I could send my colleague for that price, or and that's a great way to investigate what they really care about, because the one they're going to want to talk about is the one that's most attractive to them. But you can do that with coaching too. Okay, look, we can have 4 sessions at this price, or, an in-person is this price. And we could, or you could bring 2 of your people with you, and that would be more, and not, but if you give them a range of things to choose from, typically what happens is you can cabin their attention, and they'll just start thinking about the different things that you've offered them and stop thinking about asking to pay less. Very often it's like a magician. What magicians are really good at isn't hiding the thing in their pocket. It's making you look over there while they hide it in your pocket, and saying, here's 2 offers. What do you think about them? Is a great way to capture that attention.
And I think I've started doing that a lot more lately, where they will come to me and say, hey, Scott, we've got this budget cap, or we've got this other person at 20% less. And I'll say, okay, well, that's fair. If that's what you value this training at, I mean, I can't make you value it more necessarily. But if you value this training at that price point, here's what I can do at that price point, right? Like, we trim off the number of sessions, or yes, I do it virtually, or maybe there is somebody that partners with me on something that can come in and do it for you. So I have started taking that route a little bit more, and it's worked several times. So I've really gravitated towards that.
Yeah. Another thing I think that helps there to remember is we always tend to think that offering a lower price makes you more attractive. And I think it's often the opposite. I remember this is like 20 years ago when I first started offering, I was teaching at Harvard, and then I was offering training for law firms and corporations and stuff. And there was Ropes and Grays, this big law firm in Boston, and it was the perfect client. And so I made them a really attractive offer. And a former teaching assistant of mine was on the committee at the firm to pick who their vendor was. And he called me back and said, oh, yeah, you're not going to get it. And I was like, why? And they said, oh, well, this other guy who had just been appointed to teach at Harvard that year, was much less experienced than I was, and I thought not as good. And he said, well, his quote was for 3 times as much, so they figured he's better. And so then I was like, oh no, I wrote back to them and said, there was a typo in my offer. It's actually 5 times as much as that. And then I got it. So, a lot of times they are looking for your level of self-confidence by what your pricing is.
That's interesting too. When you think about throwing the price out there, valuing yourself at that level helps them understand that you are possibly at that level too.
Yeah.
There's the chance though that they will look at it and go, yeah, I've heard you before, man. And that is, you're not at that level, So,
well, I mean, if you don't like my stuff, why are we talking?
I know. Fair. That's fair. That's fair too.
But I think that's also important to think of the opportunity cost. If you're basically giving your work away, then you're not free when something better comes along. Mm-hmm. That's why you shouldn't keep dating somebody if you figure, okay, this relationship isn't going anywhere. When Mr. or Ms. Perfect walks by, you want to be single.
That's a good analogy. I like it. Okay, so tell me, can we talk about the psychology of pricing? How does that work? Like, because here's the thing, and the coaching, consulting, speaking, and whatever we do, it is kind of like there is a market out there ish, but there's different size companies, there's different industries, there's different people that are buying from you, whether it is, the president of a company or the HR person or the L&D person or a VP that has something with their team. Like, you're selling to a bunch of an event planner of some kind. You're selling to people all the time. So they're all going to value things at a little bit of a different thing. And so pricing is so difficult. I'm sure we're not, outliers in that space, but it's a subjective thing almost. It's like a gut. Like, how do we go about thinking about pricing? What's the psychology behind all that?
Boy, that's a big topic. One
is
of
this
the
whole
things
Harvard class that I just asked you about? Is this a whole seminar that we need to go into?
Yeah. And there's actually, for people who are interested in reading research on this, Richard Thaler is an economist, and he's got a wonderful set of papers, and I think he put it in a book. And the keywords to search for are mental accounting. Like his opening experiment is, hey, let's say you're sitting on the beach in Mexico, and your friend says, I'm going to go get us some beer. What's the most you're willing to pay for a beer? And the two versions of it are, and the place he's pointing at is this rundown little general store that looks like it's about to fall over. Or it's a luxury resort. I'm going to sneak into the bar there and get us some beers. And people are willing to pay, $10 for the beer from the luxury resort and, $1 for the beer from the rundown shack, but it's the same beer, right? A lot of what makes people willing to pay or not is external stuff that informs them about what it's supposed to cost. And one of the things that I think about there is every time you agree to a price for your services, you're establishing whether or not you're the rundown shack or the luxury resort. And so I'd be very careful, because you're establishing precedent in the marketplace for what you're worth by what you agree to. And a lot of times, even though you may actually want the small amount of money this month because you got bills to pay, we often don't calculate the long-term cost of, pricing ourselves lower than we could probably get if we, held out and did less work for more.
And sometimes we think we want to be the luxury resort, and we are kind of the rundown shack because that's kind of where we're at, or what we've done. And so to have that realization is to be true to who you are. I mean, there's a market for the rundown shack. I mean,
the rundown shack's still in business.
Totally. And crushing on to certain levels, there's a market for that. So it's understanding, I guess, where you are and what you're doing, and how to play into that. When you're presenting a price to somebody, I've heard different variations of how to present, your packages to the client and the offers. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and we kind of skipped over in our discussion so far a really crucial step that I think we probably can't do enough of. And that's learning more about the client. Every time you find out more about what they care about, why are they calling you, what's the problem? I try to spend as long as they're willing to talk on, well, why did you call me? Okay, you want help on negotiations that your people have. Tell me about their negotiations. Tell me about who are they dealing with? What are the problems they have? What do they complain about? What pain do they feel? And the more you learn about that stuff, the more you learn about whether you are a luxury resort to these people because you're on point for what they need, or whether to them you're the rundown shack. And then, if to them you're a rundown shack, I'd be like, okay, for you, I'm a shack. But you know what? This other guy I know to you is the luxury resort. So let me send you over to him. And then you can start trading clients that you're more appropriate with other people in your network. But that, I mean, learning more about what they care about is so important, that even in one case I'm thinking of, it really backfired on me. There was these two guys who were running a commercial real estate brokerage down in Arizona. And one of them was older and ready to retire. He had been a mentor to the younger guy. And the younger guy hired us to say, hey, I can't agree with him on a price to sell the business out to me. And I've made him what I thought was a really great proposal where he could retire and not have to do anything. And I'd pay him all this money and he'd still keep his name on the business and keep getting a payout. And my father-in-law was a small business P&A lawyer, like if you're selling a funeral home in a small town in Nebraska, like that was his kind of practice. And so he was going to work on the legal business end of it, and I was going to do the negotiation end of it. And because it was in Arizona, we were planning to go down there, and this was in the winter. So, it's like 2 feet of snow outside in Boston. And we had it set up so we were going to work on this negotiation every morning because we told him, you don't want to work too long on it. You get, really burnt out and exhausted and frustrated with each other. And so we're going to play 36 holes of golf every afternoon. But we did a prep call on the phone with them, or with the young guy. And we said, okay, so tell me about what's motivating the older fellow. What does he care about? And he's like, I don't know. And, we're working through that. And I said to him, well, I mean, you're offering him the chance to retire, but maybe he doesn't want to retire. Maybe he thinks you're putting him out to pasture and he's not ready for that. And the guy was completely silent for about 20 seconds. And then he said, I'll call you back, and hung up and called us back in 5 minutes and said, okay, it's all worked out. And our golf vacation in Arizona, completely disappeared. When you find out what they care about and what's motivating them, sometimes that just works like magic, which was not to our benefit in this case. But, if you find out what your clients, what they really care about, and typically, especially in a coaching situation, it's what's bothering them, what's hurting them and causing them pain. Then how you can help them, or if you can help them. And then you have a much better idea about what that help is worth to them.
Do you find that people are more incentivized to solve a pain than they are to achieve a gain?
There's a lot of research on that. The answer is yes. People hate losing, hate being hurt way more than they value the upside. Well, Kahneman and Tversky, they got the Nobel Prize for their prospect theory. And it was about basically if you lose $10, that hurts much more than if you found, I had $10 in my pocket and it dropped out on the sidewalk. The felt pain of that is so much worse than if you, pull out an old sport coat and find $10 in the pocket. The getting is not nearly as nice as the losing is bad.
So tell me about the when we're negotiating, when we're talking through this with a prospect, do we just, I've heard phrases of punch them in the bruise, right? Or just make sure you focus on that pain, right? And you dig in just a little bit more to help them understand that there is, right at the end, there is a solution, but it's really honing in on that pain point, that really, that thing that's really hurting at the moment. But people want a solution. So, I've heard about marketing language of hey, let's put all the things of you are the solution, you're the hope, you're the thing. But focusing in on the pain first. Do you agree with that approach?
Yeah. Although, I laughed when he said punch him in the bruise. I would say more find where. So I work for the volunteer fire department in town here. And I'm an EMT, so I'm working on the ambulance. I find you want to find out where the bruise is. You want to probe gently for where it hurts, but then you want to, splint it or put a Band-Aid on it, not punch them in it. You may not want to, fix it entirely because you want them to hire you, right? But you at least want to show that there is something you can do to make this hurt less. But I think that is, not only do you want to ask them questions about it and investigate about it, but it's not that impossible just for you to imagine, what their pain is. And that's something I think you can get much better at with a little bit of practice. And so like a takeaway thing I'd like to offer your audience, an exercise to do. And this is perfect if you're on a long car trip. Describe a decision that you have to make coming up. And that's a hard decision. Oh, I don't know if I should do this or not. Like the first example I ever saw, this actually exercise was made up by a teaching assistant I used to have for in preparation for a negotiation exercise. She was leading the class through this exercise of, okay, let's imagine what the other side's motivations are, their interests in negotiation lingo. And someone in the class said like, oh, no, you can't imagine that. Like, there's no way you'd be able to imagine what's going on in somebody else's mind. And she goes, okay. She says, I've been thinking about whether to cut my hair. She had bright red hair that was about 3 feet long. And she said, I've been thinking about getting a pixie cut. What are my reasons for wanting to cut it? And what are my reasons for not wanting to cut it? And, they all made their guesses. And she's like, you're about 95% right here. Here's one I didn't even think of that I should be adding to my decision. And no, you guys are wrong about this one. But it's really surprisingly easy to do. And so I would, say, tell me about a decision you're making, and I'll try to guess your motives either way. And then you tell me how close I came. Then you flip it around and say, here's the decision I'm trying to make. You guess what my motives are. And if you do that, make a habit of that, your brain starts working along those lines all the time. And everybody you look at, you're looking at as like, what are these guys' pain points? What do they care about? What do they want? What are they afraid of? And once you have that, sort of always pop up in your brain, you get a lot better at it. And then you realize you don't fully know. And that is what makes you ask more questions and listen to them more. That's also a great game to play on a first date, because you not only learn a lot about the person, what their life choices are all about, but about, just how their brain works and how they think.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sometimes we don't want to know how they think, because then it's, we don't.
Well, then we're going to realize that our proposal is never going to work.
Exactly.
You'd rather know that and get out of here than.
I think it becomes that fear, right? We're so afraid of the answer or whatever it is. We just hope that we can just sell them on just showing up, right? Whether it is that date. Think about that date. It's like, I don't want to ask too many questions because I'm afraid of what I'll hear in return or what they'll ask me back. And then I just want to make sure I'm safe, and they just want to just buy what I have. It's good. I promise. Just buy what I have.
Yeah. Well, if you find out they're only looking for a serious relationship and you're not, then, there goes your plan for later tonight. But I think it's actually smarter to spend your time with people where you are the answer to their problem, and not be, bothering the people that you're not the answer to their problem.
Because you want to be available when that person
when Mr. Perfect comes by. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. So in your book, Never Settle, you and your co-author, y'all, what are y'all focusing on in this book? Because granted, we've talked about Chris Voss and the Black Swan Group. I mean, I think when that blew up, it was like everybody got into this never split the difference mindset of how are we going to negotiate it and whatnot. What are you tackling in your book?
That's the perfect intro, because it grew out of what I learned from working with those guys. One of the problems the things that really bothered me about teaching negotiation is the ideas, the negotiation strategies that we suggest are great, and they work really, really well. And I was worried that we're not actually changing our students, because we would give them exercises like, okay, you have 1 minute to sell this pen to the person sitting next to you. And what people usually do is just tell them, oh, this is such a great pen. It's so fantastic. Like, what a nice color. And they never ask any questions. Like, how do you take notes? Do you use a pen? Do you want, and then you tell them, look, you'll be much more successful at selling if you find out more about what the customer wants. And they all go, oh my God, that's so true. That's so right. And then you do the same exercise a week later, in disguising it a little bit, and they do the exact same thing. Their behavior isn't changing just because they know the idea. It's like, Well, okay. One time, my son asked me when he was 16, "Hey, can you teach me how to drive stick?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure," because I'd already been, letting him drive automatic just around the driveway. He didn't have his license yet. He's like, "But I want to learn how to drive standard." Okay, fine, but it's nighttime. You're going to learn in the daytime so you don't crash into something. And he says, "Okay, but I really want to know. Can you just explain it to me?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, you got to put the clutch in, take it out of gear, then you put it into the gear that you want, and then you slowly let the clutch up while you hit a little bit of gas." And he said, "Great, now I know how to drive stick." And it's like, no, the ideas don't do it. You got to drill it again. You got to mess it up and practice doing it again and again. But I noticed when I told you I went to Abu Dhabi with Chris and the Black Swan people to teach, they were getting big behavioral change. And they spent a lot less time talking about the ideas and a lot more time just repetitive drill. They would distill the concepts down into tiny little micro skills and then have them drill them again and again and again. And they got huge behavioral change in a short amount of time. And so then I was thinking, okay, how can we do that? But in that case, the Abu Dhabi government, was paying a huge amount of money to Chris and his people to come train them. Most of us don't have a government that's willing to spend $200,000 on us to teach us better negotiation. So then the question is, well, what could we do that's like that, that ordinary people can do in their day-to-day life? And so what we do in here is try to take all the negotiation skills, and not just the hostage negotiation ones, because they have a very specific kind of negotiation. And there's a lot more, and Chris in his courses now talks about all that other stuff too. But, when we were teaching hostage negotiation, it was on a relatively narrow slice of the whole negotiation world. Well, all that other stuff, can we turn that into very discrete micro skills and then design practice drills for people to do to manipulate their kids or their wife or their, friends and business partners? So you practice bit by bit, just the way you coach a baseball team. You don't teach a kid how to bat just by throwing him pitches. First you say, okay, look, I just want you to stand at the plate and I'm going to pitch to you and you tell me where each pitch comes. So first we're going to train your eye to identify where the ball's going. Okay, then we're going to train you to swing the bat in all these different places. I'm going to hold the ball on a stick in different points and you're going to swing to hit it. Okay, now I'm going to pitch to you and I just want you to put out the bat where the ball's coming a little bit at a time. And I think negotiation is like a sport or like learning a musical instrument. It's a performance skill. Knowing good strategies isn't enough. You have to practice them again and again. And what the book is a whole bunch of practice exercises that we give our students at MIT and Harvard to do as homework. And that improves their negotiation skills, one discrete bit at a time.
Very cool. All right. So it's very actionable. Sounds like there's
well, the game we were just talking about guess my interest and decision, that's one of them. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. One real quick question. Well, I got a couple of questions, but this one.
Okay. No, I got time.
Well, first of all, where do we get it? The book?
It's going to be, you can get it off Amazon. Here's what
nice
the cover
poster,
like.
Man. Nice.
Yeah. The publisher sent me that. It goes on sale May 12th. Okay. And it'll be, hopefully at your local bookstore and, definitely it's on Amazon. You can also, there's a bunch of stuff on our website, neversettlednegotiate.com.
Okay. Very cool. All right. I just had this random thing come out. Really quick, anchor pricing. Do you say the price first or do you ask what's your budget?
Depends. Cause definitely what it depends on, I'd say, is do you know what the market price for this thing is, whatever you're selling or buying? And do they know what the market price is? If you don't know the market price, don't go first. Then I'd be asking them. If you are an American tourist in Istanbul and you're looking at a Persian rug, do not go first because you don't know what you're doing. And if you are selling rugs in Istanbul to tourists maybe don't go first because they don't know what they're doing and they might say something really stupid. But if you know what you're talking about, then there's a huge benefit in anchoring. And this, again, is from Kahneman and Tversky, the anchoring and adjustment effect, if anybody wants to look up the paper on it. Basically, they did a bunch of experiments about having people guess the answer to a question like, how many countries are there in Africa? And, oh, by the way, we're in room number 12. And the average guess is something like 14. And if you say we're in room number 53, the average guess is 48. And it has nothing to do with anything, but people start, their thinking somewhere and then ask themselves, how much should they move? And controlling that starting point turns out to be tremendously powerful. So if you know what you're talking about, if two investment bankers from different places buying and selling a company, you both know what you're talking about the market, go first and get the benefit of that anchoring.
That's really good. Okay, cool, man. I just had to throw that last question in there. I don't know. This interview's been all over the place, John. So it's been really good. I really appreciate you. So thanks a lot, John. Good luck out there. Keep building up the next generation of negotiators. Thank you for joining me today on How They Do That. If you found this helpful, please rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You see, I help you, you help me. That's how it works. Oh, and please do not keep this to yourself. Share the show with a fellow coach who could also use these insights. Keep exploring, my friends. Never stop asking, how'd they do that? Because with every question, you get closer and closer to refining your business and scaling your impact.